Every time you always laugh, and it is true. It's the only part of the state where I feel like I did the best I could. People kind of feel a little sad for you with only 9 children up here. But we had 5 and adopted 4 additional children. So, and I'll come back to that in a moment about the call on each of us to do what it is that this part of our state embodies, which is to cherish the value of young lives. But I'm grateful to have my wife here with us, and although she'll hate this, I'm going to ask her to stand briefly. Glenna, could you stand up, please? It is, as you can imagine, and those of you with large families know this to be true. When you have a lot of children, there's a lot of things going on in a home. And I'm blessed to have this woman as my wife, as the mother of our children, as the First Lady of the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Somebody who has a registered nurse, who understands, having been a labor and delivery nurse for years, what the true value of human life is, who has held tiny term babies as they've been taken to a NICU, that some have lived and some haven't, but there's been never a doubt from the moment those babies were born, in her mind or in anybody's, that this is a human being. I'm grateful to be married to her. I'm grateful to have some of our children here with us, who I won't ask them to stand. Some of them are here, some are not. Incidentally, let me just say something else. I'm going to share with you a piece of information. You'll be the first to know. Just last night, a young man proposed to one of our daughters. So we now have... This is a good young man who loves God, who respects life, who respects our daughter, and we're grateful that this cycle of family, this cycle of life will have the opportunity in the years ahead to continue. I just met the uncle's 27th grandchild, which, how old are, the couples? Like in their 50s, my gracious. Once again, we feel like such slackers here. We're in our 50s and we just had a daughter get engaged. The uncles are in the same age pretty much and have 27 grandkids now. So clearly we're doing the best we can. We really are trying. But let me just say this, what we're here to celebrate, it is somber. We talk about these statistics, we talk about this scourge, and it is a scourge on our nation, but we have such possibility. I hope you're encouraged by the way the tide is turning in America.
Amen.
The tide is turning in our direction. Why? Because we stand on the side of what's right. We stand with the creator of the universe. It's hard to lose when you're on that side.
Amen. Amen.
There are moments of discouragement. Clearly, the last 40 some odd years have been discouraging. When I was a boy, my mother was involved in Right to Life from the moment it began in the early 1970s. I guess probably 74, I'm not sure when it first came into existence, but I remember as a small boy, myself and my 5 brothers and sisters, walking in parades and standing on corners and holding signs and calling attention. Again, I was a boy, I didn't even fully understand, except that it was intuitive even to me as a kid, that there was something wrong with the idea that we would take an innocent human life. And as Representative Maddox just said, this is our responsibility to stand up for this. I was struck by a couple of things by those that preceded me. Father Kunith, I appreciated your prayer. I really did. It was powerful. You twice in your invocation spoke to the word dignity. And indeed, we have been endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, and one of those is the dignity of human life itself. And as Representative Maddox said, this is not something either given by government, nor does government have the right to take it. It is an inalienable right, but it is that dignity, that human dignity that the Father referred to, that these are the things we've got to fight for. I'm grateful to be a governor, to be in a position. People often ask, is it fun to be the governor? Not particularly, no, but how blessed, how truly blessed I am that you have afforded me an opportunity to stand firmly and boldly and unapologetically for the dignity of human life. how fortunate I am to be a governor of a state where my voice gets to be amplified more than perhaps it should, just by dint of the office itself. Grateful for that. Grateful to you. Representative Maddox used another term. In addition to dignity, she talked about unity. She talked about how important it is for us to be united on this front, all of us, across denomination, across creed, across socioeconomic end of the spectrum, across the entire Commonwealth, and across this nation, to stand firm on the side of what is right. And it is important. I often refer to this, I'll do it again, and given the fact that I have 9 children, I'm going to step away from the microphone, and I hope you'll still be able to hear me, but I will say this: you look at this flag. All of us have seen it. All of us have talked about this. We've all read this. But so often we take for granted the power of this phrase that's on this flag. United we stand, and divided we fall. As a nation, we have allowed ourselves to be divided on this issue for far too long. And we have fallen. 50-some million lives that have fallen because we have been divided as a nation. And yet here we are, each of those that have been here, myself, the congressman who will follow me, I'm sure, and each of you in some measure, calling for the same thing, that we stand together, that we rise up, and that we stay united. The question I have for you, do you really believe this is possible? Do you really believe it? We are winning, the tide is turning, and yet every single day lives are being lost to this incredible blight on our nation. Innocent lives are being lost. There will be a day of reckoning. People will be called to account for this. I'm just grateful again. I'm not here to preach. I'm not a preacher. I'm certainly not worthy to be somebody that will preach. But I do believe, as surely as I stand here and speak to you, I believe I will stand before my Creator someday. And I do believe that we serve a just God, a righteous God. And I believe that a righteous God on Judgment Day is going to hold people to account. I do believe this. But this does not mean we have a past.
Amen.
It doesn't mean we get a free pass in the meantime. We have to be the watchman on the wall. We have to be the ones who, when we see what's coming, sound the alarm. It is incumbent upon us to make sure that we stand in the gap. Does everyone believe what we believe, what I believe? No, perhaps not even everyone in this room believes what I believe. But I'll tell you this, the truth is the truth. Someday we're all going to know what that truth is or is not. And I think for those of us who do believe that we have, in this blink of an eye that we've been given, a responsibility that will have a ripple effect across the continuum of eternity, I believe that it's incumbent upon those of us who do believe this to be held to an account perhaps higher than those who do not. It is incumbent upon us to stand in the gap. And I'm grateful to you for having given me that opportunity. But do you believe that we can truly repeal this? Do you believe that we can turn this back, not just in Kentucky, but in this nation? I believe it's possible.
Amen.
Amen. It's interesting because I've had people wonder why I pound the table on this. People ask me why I don't just check my personal opinions at the door because I'm in elected office. Let me ask you this. How many of you see people on the other side of this equation checking their personal opinions at the door? In public law, office, or otherwise? Seriously, why is it only that people of faith? Why is it only that people who believe in a sovereign God? Why is it only that people who believe in the sanctity of human life? Why is it that we're supposed to keep our mouths shut and everyone else is allowed to have an opinion? Why? Why is that?
Amen.
I want to encourage you, be bold, be unapologetic, be strong in your conviction. And I will say this, at the risk of segueing off into a political conversation, it is imperative for those of you of a voting age that you let your voice be heard at the ballot box. It is one thing to gather here. It is another thing to applaud here. It is another thing to be united here. It is another thing to be in agreement that dignity of life is worth fighting for here. But if we keep this amongst ourselves in similar closed circles and we don't go to the polls and actually vote, you end up getting people who don't share these thoughts, and we miss the opportunity to elect people who do.
Amen.
It is critical that we get out and vote.
Amen.
This is a state, as Representative Maddox said very correctly, 60+% of Kentuckians strongly are in opposition to abortion. How then do we have so many people who have historically been elected? How is it that even on the other side, a man who's running to be the governor of this state is so strongly, unapologetically pro-abortion, supported by NARAL, supported by Planned Parenthood, with dollars, with door knockers, with people walking? They endorsed him in order to make sure he was the nominee. He represents, by registration, a greater percentage of Kentuckians than I do. How is this possible in a state where we feel what we feel, that people like this come forward because of apathy on the part of many of us? That's why. And this is, again, I'm not meant to berate, I'm not meant to belittle, but it is a call to action among all of us, and not just for those of us under this roof. I'm preaching to the choir a bit, I'm willing to bet. I understand that. But you as the choir have a voice that needs to be heard outside of gatherings like this, outside of your sanctuaries, outside of your churches. Your voice has to be heard among your friends and your neighbors, people that may or may not associate with you on the weekends, but you associate with them all week long. It's imperative that you talk to 1, 3, 5, 10, 20 people who care about human life, who value human life. And you ask them to go to the ballot box and let their voice be heard. Because if in fact we don't, we will, as our founders warned, ultimately get the government we deserve. That's the danger of a democratically elected government. We are a republic, but we elect our leaders democratically, and our founders 240 some odd years ago warned that the greatest danger of such a form of government is that eventually you get the government you deserve. Through our apathy, this is not the government we necessarily want. It is not one that values the things that we value here. Listen to culture. Again, I won't go into it, but as Representative Maddox has said, the lack of respect and appreciation for human life at every turn, the rampant disregard for the value of women and of children, people of disability, the rise of pornography in this nation, and the now nudge, nudge, wink, wink, humorous way in which it's, well, that's just the way it is. Nonsense. Nonsense. All these things, and abortion as the foundational cornerstone of this disregard for life, has led to this degradation. I spoke to a woman who was probably, I'm guessing, about 80 years old as I was coming in here, and she said, what's happening to our nation? What's going to happen? I'll tell you what's going to happen. Bad things if people like us don't stand up. If people like us don't espouse what Edmund Burke noted, that what it takes for evil to prevail, and abortion among the many things we're talking about is indeed truly evil. What it takes for evil to prevail is for good men to do nothing, for good women to do nothing, for the good young people of this country to do nothing. And so thank you for doing something, and we need to do more. We need to do more, each and every single one of us. Let me say this. I'm going to leave you with a quote that just popped in my head, actually, because of something that Savannah was saying. And incidentally, let me just tell you, Representative Maddox, Representative Fisher are the two that have been mentioned. If I start naming others, they may be here, but if I don't, I apologize. You do a good job up here, with rare exception, of sending solid people to Frankfort. Thank you. I hope you feel for the first time in a long time that your voice is being heard up here in Northern Kentucky. I'm grateful to Northern Kentucky. But I tell you, I'm appreciative of those two representatives among the many from up here who stand firmly on this issue and on others as well. But something that Savannah Maddox said about, a voice, in a life is a life, even a small life. made me think of a quote, and maybe you've heard this. It's from that brilliant philosopher, Dr. Seuss. And indeed, and it's funny, because some people know the one little line. They know the line that says, a person's a person no matter how small. But I was struck by something as I thought about that. I said, I think there's more to it. And I just Googled it up. And indeed, I'll read you the line before it and the line after it. It's quite apropos. Don't give up. I believe in you all. A person's a person, no matter how small. And you very small persons will not have to die if you make yourselves heard. So come now and try.
Amen.
Think about that. It wasn't written about this. But now with technology, now with the innovation of science, these little voices in the womb are being heard. The heartbeats are being heard. We have the ability in utero now to see things that were inconceivable. First through 3D, now 4D ultrasounds. These voices are being heard. Will our voices be heard alongside them? That's the question. I challenge you, please, if not now, when? Step up, have a passion and a sense of urgency in this election, in 2020, at every level. I'm telling you, look at the people that are running. I mean, but you literally, the fact that somebody like a Bernie Sanders is taken seriously as a potential president, and he literally believes abortion should be used for population control, is unapologetic about this. And he's not out of line with all the others running on the other side. We don't have anyone running for governor, running for state representative, running for president, or running for anything that is a perfect person. There never has been one running for political office. There never will be one. But you have a night and day differences, and it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we go and let our voices be heard and bring everyone from your churches, your parishes, and your communities with you. It's our responsibility, and not the least of which is to bring back to office the very man who has represented you well. A man who I've come to know for his intellect. There truly are very few people out of 435 in Washington that can hold a candle to his actual raw intelligence, his creativity, his sense of humor. He's a man who's a friend, not only of me personally and of many in this room, but a friend of conservative ideology. A man who is a friend of every life, born, unborn, from conception to natural death. Please help me to welcome to the stage your Congressman and a friend of life, Congressman Thomas Massie.
You know, Northern Kentucky is very happy and proud to have Matt Bevin here today. Thank you, Governor. It's true. When we look at you in Northern Kentucky and see only 9 children, we say, good start. But the Courier-Journal looks at that and says you're a tax dodge. 9 dependents. Well, we know what Governor Bevin was up to, so you can't win for losing. But it's just amazing. He really, as Savannah Maddox said, he is the most pro-life governor that we have ever had in the history of this state. So. I feel so blessed to represent a region that has an organization like the Northern Kentucky Right to Life. This is the strongest pro-life group, not just in Kentucky, but one of the strongest in the country, oftentimes outshining the national organization, in fact, and it's known all over the country. I want to retell one of my personal stories. This comes from when I was 24 and my wife was 22. I was still a graduate student. She had just finished undergraduate school. We found out we were going to have a baby. It wasn't the time in our lives when we expected to have a baby, when we planned to have a baby. We were finishing school and about to get our career started, but we were excited to have this baby. And we were pro-life, but this is when I went from being pro-life to adamantly pro-life. And I think this is what having a baby does to everybody, frankly. I don't know how anybody could have an abortion after having a baby, or even support somebody's decision to have an abortion after they've had a baby. But it goes like this. My wife and I, we lived in New England at the time, but we wanted to be surrounded by friends and family. And the baby was coming around Christmas time. So we came back to Kentucky to have the baby. And my wife came back a month earlier than me, and I was thinking, oh, please, Lord, don't let her have it before I can get home. But she was going to the doctor to have an appointment on a Friday, and this was December 15th. And I came in on a Thursday because I wanted to be there for the appointment, and the doctors did an ultrasound and said, the baby is 10 pounds. You've got to have this baby now. Thankfully, the doctor was wrong. I'll go ahead and spoil that part of the story. So you can breathe a sigh of relief. But he said, you need to have this baby now. Come back this evening. We'll check you in. And he was going to break Rhonda's water, and that would be all it would take. So we came back, and we were surrounded by family. Rhonda's parents came with us, and that's what she sounded like when she was born. So we go in. Rhonda puts that gown on, the unflattering gown with no back behind it and no bottom to it or nothing. They grease her up. They put that monitor on her, if you've ever had that. And she's laying there. It's not very flattering at all. The doctor walks out. Her parents say, well, we've seen this before. It's going to be a while. We've got time to go to Golden Corral. We'll be back. So they leave. We're in this room alone. The doctor comes back, and he says, you know what? We got really busy. Can you come back in 2 days?
No.
This is our first child. Maybe I could have gone through this without emotional trauma with our second or third or fourth child, but not this one. So I thought he was kidding. And so did my wife, but I realized he was not kidding, and he left the room. And my wife was like, no, he was kidding. I was like, no, honey, he wasn't kidding. He wants us to leave and come back in 2 days and have the baby. So, she got up, got cleaned off, took the gown off, put the stretchy jeans back on. We go walking out the door, and here come her parents. And before they saw us, I saw them. It was December, and I had 2 jackets on, so I took one of them off and wrapped it up like a baby. And they looked at me, holding what they thought was a baby. They looked at Rhonda wearing her stretchy jeans, and they were in disbelief. Now, we live on the farm that Rhonda grew up on. We bought the farm from her parents. I'm convinced I paid $100,000 extra because I pulled that prank. Could have got a deal on it, but I screwed that up. Anyways, to get back to the story, we came back 2 days later. They broke her water, and the baby was born very quickly. And it was 8.5 pounds. Elizabeth was born to us then. And I was so excited. We had known from the ultrasound that it was going to be a girl, but I didn't check before I ran out into the waiting room and told everybody, the baby's here, the baby's here. I didn't say what it was. And they're like, is it a boy or a girl? I said, well, I guess it's a girl. I didn't check. But we had an ultrasound, right? So anyways, but here's why I'm telling you that story. Our daughter Elizabeth, who's 23 right now, she was no less of a child on December 15th when the doctor said you should have this baby than she was on December 17th. And that's what really strikes me. Every time I think about that, going in the hospital 2 days early, or earlier than she was actually born, she was a baby. She was a living baby. She had a soul. The fact that she wasn't breathing air did not matter yet. I mean, she was a baby, and now she's our 23-year-old daughter. By the way, she's engaged as well, so congratulations, Governor Bevin. That baby, who's 2 days younger than she would have been if the doctor hadn't got so busy on the Friday, that baby and my wife are looking at wedding venues today, and that's why they're not here with me today, but I'm excited about that. I thought I would share that personal story because that's when, to me, I started looking back. Okay, if the life doesn't start when they're born. When does the life start? And there is no distinct point until you get to conception. There is no point other than conception for that life to start. And any argument about anything in between there just falls on its face. It defies logic to say that the life starts at some point in that 9 months that is not conception. And that's what I came to realize as we were holding that newborn baby that first week, thinking about that. Back now to Congress. Things are going better. Actually, believe it or not, things are better for us now in the pro-life movement than they have been in the past. And that's largely thanks to the Supreme Court and the president who's in the Oval Office, not necessarily because of Congress, but yes.
Amen.
I thought maybe I would be in Congress a year, 2 years, 3 years before I had to vote on something that would be a tough vote, that would involve the right to life. But I came in 2012 in a special election on the end of Congressman Davis's term, and they hadn't passed the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act. I had literally been in Congress for about a week, maybe 2. And my staffer, who's still with me today, my legislative director, she combs through every bill. She was with me that day, and she came to me and she said, "Do you realize that this National Defense Authorization Act expands abortion coverage for members of the military?" I said, "Are you kidding me? How come nobody's talking about this?" She said, "Right here it is," and she showed it to me. So they expanded abortion coverage for members of the military, ostensibly for rape and incest, but it was in there, and I couldn't believe it. So we started calling other congressional offices. We started calling groups that might sound the alarm. We called some media that we thought was friendly, and nobody would talk about it. Nobody would talk about it. And I ended up voting against it largely because of that provision that was in there, but most of my colleagues just went along. They didn't want to talk about it. We had just had an election. 2 senators lost because they used the word rape in their campaigns. And so because this involved the word rape, they didn't want to touch it. They didn't want to talk about it. Let's just pass it and move on. But things are getting better, largely because of the Supreme Court and also lower court judges that are getting confirmed. Gorsuch and Kavanaugh couldn't have come at a better time, frankly.
Amen.
Some of this wonderful legislation that Fisher and Maddox and Bevin and Alvarado have passed, it's going to go to the Supreme Court. I mean, that's going to be, there are people actively trying to overturn that right now. And so that's why it's so important that we have those new judges up there. But just to take a little tangent here for a second, I'm in the House of Representatives. I can't take credit for those judges. The president gets the credit and the senators get the credit. But I sure do get the blame when somebody gets confirmed that people don't like. In fact, when Betsy DeVos was up for nomination to the Department of Education, there were people calling me every day telling me to oppose her nomination. And my staff had to read that part of the Constitution to them that says that the Senate confirms these appointments, not the House. And then they said, most of them would say, "That's just an excuse. That's just an excuse. We know he can stop it. He's our congressman. We want him to do something to stop Betsy DeVos." So I thought for a little while, and I went to Shauna, my legislative director, and I said, "We need to stop Betsy DeVos." She looked at me kind of crazy. She's like, "Well, you don't even have a vote on that." And I said, "I need you to write me a bill to end the Department of Education." It's a one-line bill. This is a shocker. Maybe you'll be shocked. It didn't pass last Congress. So I've reintroduced the bill again. All I had to do was change the date on it. It says the Department of Education shall terminate on December 31st, 2020. That's all the bill says. It's pretty easy to understand. So now we read them the bill when they call up and complain about Betsy DeVos. But then there are those awkward moments when I meet Betsy DeVos and I have to explain to her, yes, I'm the one carrying the bill to get rid of your department. She's actually kind of a fan of it, I think. But there are no transcripts of our conversation. There is a case in front of the Supreme Court right now that just shows how ridiculous this argument has gotten. And some of you probably heard about it in the news. There was a funeral home director, a man who owned a funeral home, and one of his employees came to work. He was a man dressed in a dress. And he wanted to console families of the deceased. He wanted to take part in all of this as a man dressed as a woman. This guy didn't work in the back. And the guy said, "You're violating our dress code," the owner of the funeral home. And he said, "Well, no, I'm identifying as a woman today, so I want to wear this dress." And so the funeral home director offered him a very generous severance package. Very, extremely generous severance package. He says, "I'm not going to take it." So he had to fire the man. The families that were coming to that funeral home were not coming for that. And the funeral home owner was sued, not by the guy who got fired, but by the government. The government, it's the Equal Opportunity Commission, using taxpayer dollars, sued the funeral home director. He lost, and now this has gone to the Supreme Court, and this will be a deciding factor in a lot of other laws. Because what they're going to do, when Congress passed the law, I think it was in the 70s, he said that you can't discriminate based on sex. What the Supreme Court is either going to do or not going to do is redefine what sex means. Whether it means what your physical chromosomal makeup is, or that sex means sexual identity, which was nothing Congress intended in the 1970s when they passed this bill. So I've joined an amicus brief. This is one of the things that we can do in Congress with several other congressmen in support of the funeral home director, because this will make things crazy everywhere else if the Supreme Court upholds the decision against the funeral home director. It's just insane. In fact, the lawyers had a chance to see them in DC. They had an opportunity to question somebody who does federal research, and he said, when you do medical research, what do you put down in the data when you've got somebody who identifies as a woman, but they're really a man? And he says, well, we put down male. So at least the government is still admitting, when it's medically important, that they are still the sex that they were born. But anyways, it's a lawsuit that you should pay attention to, because it'll have repercussions in other areas. This is almost a year and a half ago, but it seems like yesterday that the Covington Catholic kids came to Washington, D.C. and ended up unwittingly, not because they wanted to, but at the center of national attention, mostly national derision from the media. It was basically thuggery and a mob, media mob that went after them. And I took up for Nick Sandman and for his classmates, both because it was the right thing to do.
Amen. Amen.
The left always knows what's at stake, and I knew what was at stake. To this day, a lot of people have the image of the protester in front of Nick and him standing there very, honestly, very eloquently and not flinching, not making a scene, telling his classmates, hey, it's okay, don't get excited, we'll get through this. But they don't remember that they were there to march for life. But the left knew that, and that's why they attacked them, because they wanted to bully all of the other schools in the country to keep them from ever sending another child to Washington, D.C. to take up for the children who haven't been born yet.
Right.
That's why that's important.
Right.
Before I tell you about a letter that I just co-signed with Matt Gaetz that we're going to send to Secretary Azar on the subject of the right to life, I want to tell you about a few of the bills that I've co-sponsored. Chris Smith's No Taxpayer Funding for Abortion and Abortion Insurance Full Disclosure Act. That's basically putting into law what's being put into the funding bills every year. Let's make that permanent law. The Hyde Amendment needs to be permanent law. So Hartzler's Defund Planned Parenthood Act, and by the way, thank you, Governor, for taking on Planned Parenthood in this state. I said, and I firmly believe, that life begins at conception, but I'm proud to sponsor Steve King's Heartbeat Protection Act, because anybody with a brain in their head has to know that you're killing something that's alive if its heart is beating. So I've sponsored that bill as well. Mooney's Life at Conception Act. Basically what we're doing in that bill is to restate what should already be obvious, and that is that the Constitution guarantees the rights of the unborn. It's already there. And then finally, the Pain-Capable Unborn Child Protection Act, which would make it a crime to abort any baby after 20 weeks. But let me tell you something that's even more serious and more pressing right now. And this is something also that we have to thank the Trump administration for. In June, the HHS, the Secretary of HHS, announced that they were going to have new guidelines for fetal tissue research. First of all, NIH is going to stop all of their own fetal tissue research. So that is great news. And they've announced they're going to put together an ethics panel so that anybody who applies for research that doesn't already have research going forward is going to have to come before the ethics panel. Now, honestly, I think any time you try to extend your own life by terminating another life, that is the height of something that's unethical, frankly. I mean, what if you could even extend our life on this earth just a little bit by killing another baby? I mean, that is the most bizarre thing. It is not, this research is not worth any price. Our souls are not worth the price. It is just not worth it. So, but here's the disturbing thing, and I'm sorry, I know there are children in this room. This is grotesque, but we got to get these facts out, and people need to know this is happening. This is happening at Harvard, University of California, San Diego, University of California, San Francisco, University of Southern California. They are taking intestines from babies, the unborn babies, up to 24 weeks old, and implanting them in mice, in the backs of mice, and trying to grow the fetal intestines in the mice. Then they've taken reproductive tracts of unborn babies. And this happened at the University of California, San Francisco. They're implanting these reproductive tracts into mice and then giving the mice estrogen to see what would happen. I mean, this is grotesque and nightmarish. They're taking the thymus glands and putting them in mice at some of these universities. The question and so we have a lot of questions, because even though we've made progress here, even though Secretary Azar has announced that they're going to set up an ethics panel going forward, there are already 200 research projects that are federally funded using fetal tissue that are ongoing, and in this coming year they'll spend $120 million on those research projects. So we've got a letter. I'm going to read you just part of it. To Secretary Azar, and we start by congratulating him, but we have questions. Please provide a list of currently funded grants using human fetal tissue that includes the end date and renewal date for each grant. For each project, please identify how many fetal livers, thymus, and other body parts are used, the cost per body part, the total cost of fetal tissue. Please indicate how many different babies were used in each